Hello, listener. You will be able to enjoy Cosmic Motion even if we're discussing a movie you have not yet seen. But as we're talking about many elements of this film and will almost certainly spoil some aspects, if you'd rather not know anything in advance, watch the movie first and then come back and join our discussion. Welcome to episode 14 of Cosmic Motion, an audio program where we discuss motion pictures good, bad, ugly, and always interesting throughout the cinematic cosmos. We are filmmakers talking about films and filmmaking. We're recording this on February 16th, 2025. I'm here with high society playboy Colin Dixon. Colin is a multimedia editor and man about town.
And I am here with Bill. And he is a writer, director, raconteur, all of the tours.
Tor Johnson.
Tor Johnson.
John Bernstein is a longtime film festival programmer and creative producer with deep roots in the indie film world. He spent nearly 18 years as a producer at Walt Disney Studios, where he created award-winning documentaries, shorts, web series, interactive experiences, and other content for franchises including Pirates of the Caribbean, The Muppets, Star Wars, and various other feature films and ABC television series. In the festival world, John was a programmer for AFI Fest for a decade, served on the short film screening team for Sundance for 10 years, and before moving to Los Angeles was one of the key figures behind the Atlanta Film Festival. Most recently, he has been involved in numerous film projects, including producing Getting Lost, the new documentary from director Taylor Morden. A passionate advocate for Hollywood history and preservation, John remains actively involved in the film community, both as a filmmaker and historian. Welcome, John.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Absolutely. Can you guys hear those sexy tones that John has given off?
Velvety, dulcet.
Dulcet.
Why, thank you.
Tell us, let's start at the beginning here. Where did your passion for films begin?
You know, I don't exactly remember the very beginning. I know that my parents, especially my mother, well, my parents watched a lot of musicals, so you can either rebel from that or embrace it, and I mostly embraced it. And then old movies were on a lot. This is before Turner Classic Movies even existed. And I, you know, a lot of them didn't resonate with me at a very young age, but I started seeing films that were a little more tailored for children or a younger audience. We didn't have the renaissance of, I don't know if it's a renaissance, but children's films like we do now. But everything from Hans Christian Andersen to, you know, even The Sound of Music. Certainly Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was huge for me as a kid. Sure. I mean, it still is, by the way. I watched it somewhat recently, and I think it holds up.
Then Caractacus invented a fantastic magical car. It floats, it flies, and it carries adventure wherever it goes.
I have to see that. I think I saw part of it as a kid. Did you see it, Colin?
No, that's actually a hole in my viewing experience as well.
Well, do you guys like musicals?
Certainly.
Yes.
Fantastical musicals?
Yeah.
So I love it. I mean, I'm a Mary Poppins fan as well. And this is sacrilegious to say, but I almost think I could watch Chitty Chitty Bang Bang more often than Mary Poppins, and as much as I love both. They both have the music of the Sherman Brothers, Richard Sherman, who just passed away recently, last year.
Now, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is the flying bed experience. Do I have that right?
No, that would be bed knobs and broomsticks.
Oh, jeez.
But there is a flying object that doesn't usually fly.
Is it a car?
It is a car.
Ah, okay, that's what it is.
Also known as Chitty.
Is that, and that's the sound that it makes when it flies? Or?
Well, don't give it away. Well,
I was just
we're going to
guessing.
give away another movie, not this movie. We didn't give a disclaimer about this movie.
I didn't know that was a spoiler.
It's a lovely film. It's fun. The performances are great. I love films that are set in oddly ambiguous European towns. That do they exist or not? Which brings me to Willy Wonka, which is still really up there in my favorite films of all time.
Absolutely.
generally watch it about once a year.
You're talking about the Johnny Depp, of course.
Of course. Was there another one made?
Well, okay,
after,
he could be talking about the Timothy Chalamet. Let's give him
Oh,
a little
that's true.
credit.
Okay.
And those are the only two, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I feel like that goes without saying, right? If anybody is listening to this assuming it's the Johnny Depp film, and Tim Burton had a hand in that too. We have to blame him as well.
Yeah.
So,
Have you actually explored the filmography of Mel Stewart?
Yes, a little bit. He was a documentarian, and actually saw him speak before he passed away. Obviously, it's less compelling after, but he did a thing at the Alex Theater a number of years ago and showed the film and talked a little bit about his career. Didn't he do sports films too and political films? And
Yeah, I mean, it's thinking back on Willy Wonka, it's just got such a unique look to it, and like the documentary thing does feel like it informs it, but there's almost kind of like
absolutely
like a sense of neo-realism in there or something. I don't know.
You're right though, but there are those weird components that a modern audience who doesn't remember it from their childhood and not really familiar with like a 70s vibe.
Yeah.
They have those while they're looking for the golden tickets, the scenes that feel very news related, documentary like, certainly absurdist for sure, but thoroughly enjoyable, and I think it holds up. So anyway, those films were important to me. And then I remember at an early age when we were moving to Illinois from Ohio, staying at friends of my parents' house in Chicago for one night, and they were watching this thing which I'd never seen before, and it was the Marx Brothers, A Night at the Opera, and immediately became a massive Marx Brothers fan because all of a sudden there were these adults acting like children. I never quite got into the Stooges per se, but I started getting introduced to the Marx Brothers at a fairly young age, maybe like 9 or 10. And
They were a big influence.
yeah, they were a big influence.
Did you grow up partially in Chicago? Where were you?
No, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, which has a great film festival, by the way. I was there last year.
Yeah, Cleveland International Film Festival.
Absolutely. Fantastic festival. And in Playhouse Square, great theaters there. I always got to give a shout out to historic theaters that haven't been knocked down. So, and then we moved to Central Illinois when I was around 10 years old.
What was the town?
Bloomington.
Bloomington.
Yeah, the home of State Farm Insurance, where, yes, my dad did work.
Okay.
And went to Southern Illinois University. Not that you asked, but just for
Carbondale?
Carbondale, Salukis.
Right on.
Yep. And was a little bit involved with their film festival there, the Big Muddy Film Festival. That was my first entry into film festivals at all. Yeah.
I know Milcho Manchevsky went there. Joe Swanberg went there.
Yeah, Swanberg went there.
There's a few alumni there that I've heard about.
Certainly after I left there, they had a renaissance. I can't keep saying renaissance. They had a string of good luck, or maybe they were teaching them well that
they were learning them good.
They were learning them good. That they won, like, I might have this wrong, but like 3 Student Academy Awards in a row.
Oh, wow.
After I left. But that's not why you're here to talk about that today.
That's true. What's your favorite aspect of filmmaking, would you say?
Well, for me, I like things that move me, that stories that fascinate me, and I've worked in various forms of filmmaking, and you mentioned the Muppets, and working on scripted stuff with the Muppets and doing a web series with the Muppets is like, I'm a huge Muppet freak. We could talk about that forever, but documentaries to me are the process of making a documentary, if it's a subject you're into, is so exciting and
you like trying
nourishing.
To capture reality in some form?
It's capturing the reality. It's also the research and delving into a story and looking for aspects that fascinate me. And hopefully if they fascinate me, they will also fascinate others, like-minded people, or surprise people who didn't think they were interested, which almost leads to, and I won't give it away, but the film we're going to talk about today, it's just like, which is not something probably most people have seen. And the genre is something that I always love when new people discover, but we'll get there.
Absolutely. With documentary, do you find that you write, when you capture the interviews and all your B-roll and everything, do you then go and write a script, or are you more of the kind of producer that goes into the editing room and kind of finds it with the editor later, or is it both?
It's generally both. I mean, there is no one rule. Well, some filmmakers have a style, and that is their style, and that's fine. But I think scripting it out, having a thesis, having an outline, being willing to be curious enough along the way to throw what you had in mind out or rethink things, unless this is the story I am telling, and I'm going to try to fit my narrative. And if they don't say what I want, I'm throwing it out. But the process to me is discovery is a beautiful thing in the filmmaking process. It's not just creating something and delivering it to an audience, but it's also hopefully you grow as a storyteller along the way.
It's alive.
Absolutely.
And you're growing with it.
And by the way, I do want to mention being involved with film festivals for so long, I would say actually has made a huge difference in my life and informed who I am as a person and my worldview.
Yeah.
So when I started going to Sundance, which
is where you and I met, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In fact, I met so many people I know and love at Sundance and other festivals, but Sundance has been a huge part of my life. I've been going for decades without missing a year, and I'm good friends with the festival director Eugene Hernandez, who's a lovely guy who started IndieWire. And my point is, when I started going, I was already kind of a open-minded, liberal-ish kid, but I still had a fairly narrow worldview, being a kid from Cleveland and central Illinois, relatively small town, but open to things. But when I started going to see unique voices, not my story, not just a white guy from the Midwest. Some of them challenged me, some of them shocked me, some of them surprised me, some of them scared me, and I'm so thankful for the experience of getting representational voices that have hopefully made me a little better as a human being. And that's what good art can do, period. Hopefully.
Well, speaking of art, what projects are you working on lately?
I've got a couple things. One thing specifically in development right now, which I can't really talk about. I was involved recently, as you mentioned, with Getting Lost from Taylor Morden, which I worked on the TV series Lost. And so I was a producer, a consulting producer on this new doc, which is now available. And
okay, so that's all about the backstory on how Lost came to be, and
sort of, yes, it goes there, but it's really about the fandom, and that show was unique. It's not like there hadn't been TV shows, series before that had fan bases, of course, but that show came along at a time kind of pre-Twitter, pre-Instagram. Podcasts were in their infancy. They did exist, but they were just barely rolling along. But I was a part of this world building. What's the word I'm looking for? It's the world building outside of the show, looking for new ways to engage with the audience, to further the story, to explore not just making of stuff. I mean, certainly we did do that, lots of that. But it was really immersing you in a show after the show. And it happened a little before that, but not much. And certainly now it's expected. If you're going to create a series and you don't have a YouTube channel, an Instagram page, podcast, several podcasts, then you're not doing it right.
Or if you don't literally follow the episode with a mini documentary or a mini, a talking head interview about the thing that you just watched.
And Lost certainly had and has a surprisingly huge, I say surprisingly, I'm not totally surprised, but it's a very loyal fan base still.
No, that really feels like when we talk about the kind of the rebirth of television, that feels like one of the series that kind of was the most widely accessible water cooler discussion shows coming out of that kind of rebirth. Because everything before that was kind of considered to be prestige TV was HBO stuff, The Wire and Sopranos.
Yep.
Lost might have been the first kind of actually network phenomenon to kind of breach that. I don't know.
It's definitely one of them. I mean, I obviously like Twin Peaks probably did that a little earlier.
Sure.
But Lost had a lot of seasons. Twin Peaks did not, and it stuck around for years.
I mean, like in the aughts, and when TV kind of had a return to form.
Right.
But to your point, Twin Peaks might have, if in a slightly different era, gone further in more seasons and had more. David Lynch might have
had more control.
Absolutely. And maybe done a podcast back then. Sure. Maybe done an offshoot web series. And the DVDs didn't exist when Twin Peaks came out? Was it late 80s, right?
Yeah, 89 is when the pilot was made, and it started, I think, airing in 90 or 91.
Yeah, and DVD didn't hit for another, it was almost a decade, not quite, but so, and VHS, existed, but that wasn't where people did stuff like that, really.
Well, we're going to jump back in time now, way before the second coming of television, to 1923 in the film made by Charles Chaplin, A Woman of Paris, A Drama of Fate. I was absolutely knocked back because suddenly the whole medium grew before my eyes. Suddenly here was a grown-up film with people behaving as they do in life, and scenes treated with an enormous sophistication. It's directly responsible for my own rather over-serious attitude toward making film, end quote. That's Michael Powell talking about A Woman in Paris. What did you guys think of A Woman in Paris? Well,
I can see how it may have been formative. I suppose I'm surprised that it's a Charlie Chaplin joint.
Mm-hmm.
It was a surprise. It's definitely a side of him that I didn't expect. I don't know if it necessarily succeeds on its own terms.
Okay.
But we can get into that.
We can. John, real quick, first impression of Women in Paris?
First impression is complicated. I am a bit of a Chaplin freak, and the same reason it didn't sort of resonate with audiences is probably what stopped me from watching it sooner. Because Charlie directed almost all his films.
Yeah,
certainly,
and
after he left
acted in
Keystone.
almost all his films.
All of them except for this one.
Yeah,
all of them.
Yeah.
The reason I've never watched it is because I knew he wasn't in it, and like one of the geniuses of him is the full package, right?
Yeah.
So did I enjoy it? Absolutely, but I'm also have a proclivity towards silence, and I know that I don't watch as many dramas as comedies in the silent era, and I am fearful of melodrama, right? I don't typically like overplayed melodrama, and that's one of the things the comedies generally either stay away from or poke fun at.
Sure.
But it's hard. I'm well aware of Edna Purviance and her work with Chaplin and Chaplin's work and some of his stock players. So I enjoyed it, and the score that Chaplin did much later, which we'll talk about. But so I enjoyed it on a different level. And I also tried to put myself in the times contextually.
Sure.
Because we have different brains now and I'm sure that's probably where you're coming from. And I get it, totally get it. It feels like things we've seen before, but that's because this is one of the OGs, right? Of all,
sure.
It's like growing up watching sitcoms and finally going back and watching I Love Lucy and going, oh, I've seen this kind of bit a million times before. I'm like, yeah, but I Love Lucy is basically where it started. So I have a hard time, maybe you can, but I have a hard time trying to contextualize what it must have been like in 1922. Now.
I was absolutely trying to bring that context in as well. In fact, there's a decadent party scene in this film, and I remember thinking to myself, oh man, they're showing ankle. This must have been really risque, you definitely do have to kind of put yourself in that mindset.
Colin, why don't you show us some ankle and give us a little plot breakdown?
Oh, that's a good ankle. Bravo,
yeah,
my friend. I say, yeah, nice.
Freshly shorn. Marie, a countrified French woman, and her fiancé Jean, an ineffectual and taciturn aspiring artist, are revealed to be plotting an elopement to Paris after Marie sneaks away from her home for a stroll one late evening. Scrutinized and disliked by virtually everyone in her immediate domain, a series of characters decide to upend their plans, including her Thomas Edison lookalike father, who locks her out of her home, and Jean's father, who reacts to Marie being in his house as if she has the Ebola virus. The two use this opportunity to hasten their plans, and Jean instructs Marie to wait for him at the train station while he goes back home to pack, whereupon confirmation of their plans causes Jean's father to have a massive stroke, or something like it. Boy, oh boy, people in this town sure do hate this woman. When speaking over the phone, Jean relays that a crisis may have to delay their plans, and before he can explain the details, Marie inexplicably assumes the worst and boards the train to Paris alone. Jumping into the not-too-distant future, a more elegant and exalted Marie is revealed to us, attending dinner with her generous paramour and businessman, Pierre Ravel, who is engaged to marry another woman. Steeped in a world of luxury and revelry, a friend of Marie's invites her to an extravagant pillow fight, but having a sense of direction on par with Mr. Magoo, Marie is misdirected to the wrong building, where she is once again reunited with her former flame, Jean, who's living meagerly with his mother. She commissions him to paint her portrait, which rekindles their feelings for one another, and whereupon Jean entreats for them to be married once again. Jean unbecomingly stalks and Mrs. Doubtfires his way back into Marie's affairs, where he learns that she will be stepping out again with the insouciant Pierre Ravel. In his despair, he entreats to confront Marie for a final time. And this time, it's personal.
Wow.
I
should watch that movie.
That's the plot. Wow. Yeah. So, okay. So
amazing.
That was a breakdown of the plot. You got it.
Too much editorializing?
No.
Okay.
Insouciant.
Insouciant is a lovely word. We do have to talk about Adolphe Menjou. So this is written by Charlie Chaplin. He based it on a socialite, I guess you could call her. Other people might call her a gold digger. Her name was Peggy Hopkins Joyce, and she was from Virginia. She was a barber's daughter. And she was known for marrying and divorcing millionaires and making a little career of that. And Chaplin looked like he might be next on her list.
Next conquest.
He kind of instead dropped her but used her story as the basis for A Woman of Paris. And he didn't work from a full script. He worked from a series of notes.
Right. Well, that was his frequent MO. It's interesting contrasting. There are other filmmakers who also worked that way occasionally later. You could even say that Kubrick even occasionally. He would have a script, but then what Chaplin would do, and he certainly did it even on this film, which is he knew the story in his head, rock solid. And he explained it to me. He knew what he wanted to tell, but he would shoot 2 or 3 days, and then he would shut down production for like 2 or 3 weeks while he's rethinking scenes, connecting material, going a different direction. That's the luxury of having your own studio.
What an amazing way to make films.
Yes, not practical.
Not practical, but artistically helpful.
Correct. Absolutely. And again, some filmmakers did adopt a bit of that style, as much as they could.
Right. Even in present day, I mean, it isn't the same. He doesn't shut down production for 6 months, but Terrence Malick, he writes a script, and then he completely will deviate if he determines during shooting that there's something better to be found.
That's right. And the other thing that Chaplin did, which again, most filmmakers don't have the luxury to do now and didn't then, which is shoot sequentially.
Yes.
Which is artistically very helpful. It's great from all departments. Right? You can, age your characters and their wardrobe. The cinematography, Rolly Tothero, who was Chaplin's regular cinematographer for decades, from the 1910s through the 40s.
He shot this as well.
It's also helpful to them, right, to shoot sequentially, but it's costly and problematic and not practical and almost never done. It's a rarity.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, from what I understand from a documentary I watched on the film, he would actually literally, if he had a scene in a room and then he went away to another part of the house or whatever, he would go shoot that part of it and then come back to the room, So they're taking down and putting up lights like crazy to actually shoot this in order, which is, as John said, impractical.
Tati apparently also worked that way a little bit, and Orson Welles shot in a fragmented, unpractical manner, rewriting and improvising quite a lot. So I'm not sure anybody did it quite like Chaplin or had the luxury to do it quite like Chaplin did. He was kind of in rarefied air, but there are others who he influenced, not just artistically, but even in the methods. Right.
I mean, something we should clarify for those who don't know, he was already a superstar at this point. He was massive.
Absolutely.
He was huge around the world.
Absolutely.
So imagine, the most powerful director you've ever seen. Everybody knows his name. Everybody calls him the Little Tramp or Charlie Chaplin, and he gets to do what he wants because he makes money. And
so much so that I think it's generally accepted that he, soon after Mary Pickford and Mickey Mouse, were the 3 biggest superstars in the world.
Wow.
By far. For a short period of time, there was nobody bigger on the planet than those 3. But I'm looking at one newspaper ad that I pulled here.
Oh, look at that. Criterion Theater.
Criterion Theater, granted 7th. The boldest type on the ad of this newspaper, and there were tons of them like this, is Charles Chaplin, and then in smaller print, does not appear in A Woman of Paris. So he was the draw, but they wanted to alert people, you're not going to see him. I mean, he plays a very small, unrecognizable role as a train porter. But if you wouldn't have told me that was him, even I, who've seen him out of makeup and have pictures, every book about him that I could find, I would not have known that.
The only reason why it's conspicuous that it may be him is because he's the only person on screen. So it's like you sit there for maybe 3 seconds and you watch a train porter carrying a box and then drop it to the ground and you say, why are we watching this? Oh, that's because it's him. That's Charlie Chaplin. Okay.
But by the way, that mentioned Raleigh Tothero. I don't know if you know about that scene and how they created the train that's going by.
Yes.
Yeah,
go ahead. No, you tell us.
I think it's ingenious. It would totally work. I didn't know this when I watched the
Let's set
film.
it up first. So I heard you say Edna Purviance. Is that the way you pronounce it?
So there's controversy about it. I will come down on the side of yes, that's the way you say her name. I think that's the most accepted. There've been so many documentaries out there about Edna, well researched, sometimes with the Chaplin family participation, and she should be remembered. I mean, she was in 30 of Charlie Chaplin's films.
She was his muse for a long time.
Absolutely, and in some of the greatest films and short films in my mind ever made, like some of my absolute favorites. Mm-hmm. So the train sequence, again,
she's just gotten off the phone, right? This is when she's just gotten off the phone with Jean.
Right. And she's heading on the train to go to the big city.
There we go.
Basically. I was in the moment and believed the scene and didn't think about how it was made. I totally bought that she was at a train station getting on a train. And remember, there's no sound effects either. So they can't even do the support sound effects. And Chaplin just had some gobos, basically, in filmmaking terms.
Well, let's give Tothero the credit here.
Tothero. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Tothero cut basically panel holes.
Yep.
Do we know what kind of material it was?
I thought I heard him say in this documentary it was like a board. It was a board. Yeah. It was a long wooden board with holes in it.
Right.
Essentially creating a kind of cucoloris or flags, alternate flags, and then gaps in the flags. And that created the effect.
Just passed it by light.
Of the lights playing on her as she's looking at the train. And you never see the train.
Never see the train.
You just see the lights play on her body and she's watching it and then she walks toward the light.
But it's not something, at least I thought about when I was watching it. I just bought that she was at a train station getting on a train, and it was probably shot. It was shot. This whole movie was shot at Chaplin Studios, which is now Henson Studios, which is now John Mayer McGee Studios. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
McGee's over there.
Yeah,
I knew it was Henson.
I don't know if Henson's vacated the place yet, and I think Kermit might still be on top of and dressed in Chaplin's baggy pants.
Tramp outfit. Yeah.
I mean, it was going to become a Scientology center, so at least.
Oh my gosh.
At least they're still making art there.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
Anyway, so Chaplin, I like to say Chaplin didn't invent cinema. He, in my mind, is one of the few who really explored it and turned it into an art form. There aren't many innovators who understood the medium like he did and decided this can be something more than cheap melodrama, or like if you look at the Keystone films he made with Max Sennett. I love in some realm the Keystone Cops and the Sennett Bathing Beauties and all that stuff, but it's a little more slapsticky and wacky. And when people think of silent movies, if they haven't watched a lot, I think they think of that. Right. And that's not fair because it's so much more than that. But that is an aspect of it.
It's a part of it. And Chaplin came from that too, right?
He did come from that.
But also, and especially with the Sennett films, they were really cranked out. And by cranked out, I mean it was an assembly line process. So
absolutely,
that's maybe that's also what distinguishes Chaplin from the rest of the chaff, is that his product doesn't feel cranked out, even if occasionally it was.
Right. No, he knew it. He had an eye for this. I mean, he came up in the music halls, the Fred Carnot troupe in the UK. I wonder what would have happened if he hadn't found his character so early, because I think that helped him explore. Some people don't like it, frankly. You always get into this battle of Keaton versus Chaplin, or Keaton.
They're both brilliant. Why do we need to worry about that?
Yeah, Keaton, Lloyd, and Chaplin. And some people don't. They don't like the pathos that came along. I buy all of it.
I love the pathos.
I
think Chaplin makes me feel in a way that few even contemporary directors or writers know how to make me feel. Like the things he could do with comedy and tragedy were brilliant. And this movie is a testament to that. Although I do prefer it when he had both in the same film. I do like, for instance, City Lights or Modern Times. Those films just knock me out.
Well, you're getting at the core of what I love about a good silent film. Let's speak generally, right? I think sometimes there's more artistry and beauty in being able to go through the full range of human emotion. That's why I'm not a big melodrama fan, because it's overly heightened. But if you can do it artistically, like City Lights you're talking about, that's one of the most, to me, I mean, it's kind of cliche to say it, but you can't be a huge Chaplin fan and not think City Lights is one of the best films of all time, period. Right. And the fact that he doesn't push, that he is restrained. He fought to be restrained, even in A Woman in Paris, which in modern sensibility, you can still see some things that feel melodramatic in the version I think we all watched.
Right.
We can talk about this in a minute, the music, but there are a couple of moments where I thought the music made it feel more melodramatic than it was. There was one, I don't remember exactly where in the film it was. Early in the film, I felt like, oh, this music is making it feel melodramatic. The performance isn't doing that. And that came, that music was added in the 70s. So I had a problem with the music. But I think the beauty on a great silent film is that it doesn't need language for you to feel like there's so much of a language of its own that communicates really well to an audience.
Well, so did anybody run the experiment of watching the film sans music? Because I felt the same way that you did, John, and I kind of just wanted to kind of run the experiment on a few scenes, and I actually felt that those scenes worked so much better. But then I realized, you mentioned putting yourself back into context as well. I kind of wanted to put myself in the context of somebody who had been watching this in the 20s, and I realized that this would have been accompanied by something, probably. So I opted to keep the music on, but I do think that there is a little bit of a value add with trying the silent experiment.
This gets back to, this brings up a bunch of things. First of all, I watch silent films at home occasionally. Living in Los Angeles, we're lucky. There's less than there used to be, but there's still a good number of screening opportunities in town in some old movie palaces with live music. And it's everything from what the silent movie used to have regularly, which is an organist or a piano player playing along with the film. Or if you're lucky, you get to see the LA Chamber Music Orchestra playing, or even a modern band doing kind of a twist on a silent movie score. Last Remaining Seats used to do that regularly. TCM Festival usually has some silent movie with live music program. And I much prefer that experience. It's close to what you're saying. But one of the things that you're saying that brings up is that some people who are not silent movie people either have never seen any or barely seen any, sometimes have the misperception that silent movies were silent. That was, as far as I know, almost never the case. It almost never happened. So what usually happened was in small, little box theaters, kind of like the silent movie theater on Fairfax used to be, they would just have a pianist or an organist. And sometimes a film would be accompanied by a suggested score or a cue sheet to play, but frequently different theaters had different licenses or agreements with music libraries that even existed then. And a lot of times the pianists, organists would be amazing improvisers, and they would just pull from what they know. And this feels like a dramatic moment. And they would improvise a music score. If you were lucky enough to live in a big city, frequently you would get some level of an orchestra playing with a film. So what's really interesting for A Woman, bringing it back to A Woman in Paris, to your point, before Chaplin and Eric James added the score in 1976, I think, 1 year before Chaplin died, who knows what experience people had of watching A Woman in Paris. I'm sure, can you imagine
there was
Star
an original
Wars?
Score, you know that, right? There was an original score.
Talk about it.
It's Louis F. Gottschalk and Fritz Stahlberg. So they were uncredited, but there was an original score that went with it. And then what John and Colin are talking about is that around 1976 to 1978, one of Chaplin, actually it was his last major sort of filmmaking project, was putting the score on this movie and re-releasing it in that time. And he made the score mostly himself with the help of that other composer. I like the score. I didn't feel like it hurt too much, but maybe I think I was also kind of thinking of it more in terms of the time that it came out rather than the time that it was re-released in the 70s.
Right.
It probably would have been a little bit too heavy-handed for the 70s, but for the 20s, it was fine. And
well, I mean, if I can make just a simplistic observation about it, there were times that it just tonally did not match the scene. You know, so that's really the only time.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. It took me out. I noted it a couple times, and I didn't.
Where were you taken out?
I can't remember what it was. It was fairly early in the first third of the film. I felt like, why is the music swelling so much here when that's not what I'm seeing on screen, and it's telling me how to feel, and that's not what I want from any film score.
Right. Or you know, Jean would be contemplating his situation and you know, or having some moment of despair, and the music would kind of be whimsical, you know, and so there were times that it just totally didn't match, and there are also these big orchestral hits at a moment of, you know, like a pop out and scare you moment. Or any time like a villainous character would enter that were just a little bit too over the top.
Having said that,
I did not have that experience, but I respect the experience you guys did.
Having said that, well, you know, your experience is what you feel it is.
It's
so
true.
We don't want to rob you of that. I will say there is lots of discussion and controversy. Not controversy, maybe is a little strong, but on the music that Chaplin rescored all his features later in life. And some of them are really brilliant and iconic and amazing, and they've been released in recent years on vinyl and separately. The Chaplin estate has re-released that stuff, and some of it's masterful and fantastic. Having said that, not all of it sits super well. It's also from kind of a 1960s, 1970s perspective. Gold Rush is a great example for me. And it's not just music. It's Chaplin decided to take out the intertitles because he didn't think audiences wanted to read their films, even though he didn't use large numbers of intertitles. You know, you can always tell talented filmmakers if they don't have to have you read card after card after card, it's not necessary. And he prided himself on limiting that. But he went back and rescored the Gold Rush, which is a great score. But he also added his voice describing the action over the film, and he spoke in a fairly erudite upper crust British accent, and the little fellow then marches across the tundra. And, you know, and to me, I prefer the silent version and the cards and not hearing his voice, which I'm curious how his voice evolved over the years because he didn't come from that upper crust lifestyle.
No, he did not.
No. But I'd go back because a lot of the film scores and City Lights and probably my favorite, I don't know, it's tough. It's hard to say it's not City Lights, but I'm such a massive fan of The Circus, which is, if people haven't seen The Circus, I mean, I'm getting ahead of recommendations, but it's such a brilliant, and if you can see it live with a live audience, like live music, do, because the audience will erupt in laughter. There's so many scenes. There's a magician scene. There's a monkey scene. It's also got its pathos that we were just talking about with Chaplin.
Well, something that we should stress, and I think we talked about this a little bit, is that every single film of his 70 prior had been a comedy.
Yeah.
So this, you know, when this comes out and it's a drama and Chaplin isn't in it, at least not you know, in any kind of significant way.
Right.
It really shocks the audience, and the movie basically tanks. It is not a success. Critically, it is. Critically,
big success critically.
They loved it, but the actual audience did not go out to see this, despite all the warnings that Chaplin gave. He gave out a letter to people standing at the premiere, you know, this is something different. I'm not going to be in it, and it is a drama.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, sure.
So, well, there's two things. In the movie itself, there's a title card. So he's basically apologizing to the audience, right? Which is unheard of. But I think he was aware of the feedback.
The shock, yeah.
Yeah. So in the film itself, it says, in order that there may be no misunderstanding, I wish to announce at the outset that I do not appear in this picture. It is the first serious drama written and directed by myself, Charles Chaplin. And then he wrote another letter that appeared in newspapers and was sometimes included in promotional materials for the film. To the public, for the first time in my career, I am presenting a picture in which I do not appear. A Woman of Paris is a drama of life, a sincere attempt to tell a story about real people with true-to-life incidents. It is a simple story of love and tragedy without the usual theatrical exaggeration. I have tried to avoid artificially and the obvious tricks of melodrama. It is my first serious production, and I am hopeful that it will meet with your approval. Sincerely, Charles Chaplin. Can you imagine a filmmaker, Chris Nolan, sending out basically a letter of apology in advance of a film or something like that?
I'm not going to play with time.
What expectations were, right?
Right. He understood his audience, and that's also kind of such a humble move. I love that he did that. I think something that we should also talk about is how this film came to be. Before I was talking about the socialite that it was inspired by, but also Chaplin thought Edna Purviance was growing out of comedies and wanted to give her a serious dramatic role within which to stretch. And this was that role. So he was trying something new, and who knows, had it been successful, he might have made a bunch of these, but it wasn't successful.
To take a little more of a harsh critical view on Chaplin, because he was, in fairness, he was a complicated guy. And the public way they put it is that she was getting too old to play the ingenue. But I think he also felt maybe she was getting too old to play his love interest in films, right? It was also a little selfish in a way, and he felt guilty. He married Lita Gray, which was also a complicated thing. Without her knowing it, she read about it in the newspapers, and they had been more than just work partners.
Right. So this movie actually, and that was kind of a note that I had, it kind of mirrors reality in a little bit.
Absolutely.
I mean, which is kind of strange if you think about it. And it also makes you wonder if Ms. Purviance would have had a career that would have spanned a long, because this is essentially the last film that she does, right? Or maybe she does one more serious film after this.
No, this was the last film she did. She was in a couple other things. One was The Seagull, which was unreleased. It was Chaplin produced. It was also called A Woman of the Sea. And he destroyed the negatives, so it's basically a lost film. And then she was in one other film in a very small role. A French silent filmmaker made it. And
she is in a few other Chaplin films, but later on...
She has a cameo in Monsieur Verdoux.
Yes. She's in Monsieur Verdoux, and she's also in Limelight.
So he kept her on a retainer, did he not? I think that he paid her like $1,000 a week or something like that.
I didn't see the amount. Is that right?
Yeah, until her death.
Until her death.
Oh, well, except for except for the period of time where she was married to like an airline pilot or something like that. but as soon as he died, she was back on his retainer, which is interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's sad because she was in some of the most seminal films. I was going to say silent films, but seminal films, period, in terms of the birth of cinema. And yet a majority of the people, even the people who know who Chaplin was, don't know her or her name and wouldn't be able to pick her out of a lineup. There are certainly tragic stories that come out of the silent era and every era of filmmaking and every job and every, realm. But the silent film era certainly had, Mabel Normand died and had a complicated life and died young. And she was seriously one of the first female directors in Hollywood, period. Again, another name that's not known super well, which is a shame. There are plenty of stories like that. You look at what happened with Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, who was wrongly accused of rape, and his career never rebounded. And even Buster Keaton had a good life, but also had hard times. And
he had a rough life at a certain point. Yeah, when the studios tried to take over and tell him how to make films, he kind of descended into alcoholism and lost a lot of money and did not have a good time.
Which really helps illustrate the fact, I don't think people may know this, that silent films really fell out of favor massively. As much as we are nostalgic now and recognize them as great cinema, and even Scorsese quotes A Woman in Paris as being a seminal film that was important in the history of filmmaking. Still, silent film wasn't put on that pedestal when it died. And it wasn't until many years later there was a Life magazine article that came out that helped reframe why silent film should be loved and remembered.
And it was probably also people like Kevin Brownlow. And
it was absolutely
documentaries.
So I was going to save some of that for later, but Kevin Brownlow wrote a book called The Parade Gone By, which was a thick, lovely, fantastic. There's so many books on the era, but if you're looking for one book to start with, that's the one. And those things, those the Life magazine, that Kevin Brownlow book, and then future docs he did, which we can talk about in a minute, really helped reignite looking at silent films a different way. The other thing for me that was big, and for other people, is there's a filmmaker named Robert Youngson who made a series of films, and basically they're 90-minute clip packages. They're fast-paced, and there's one called When Comedy Was King, and there's one more I'm forgetting, but those films I saw at an early age and basically introduced me to people who I didn't know, right? So Charlie Chase and Colleen Moore and Snub Pollard and Ben Turpin. These were not all names. They were big stars of the silent era, along with Chaplin, Keaton, and Lloyd, the big three. But those films came along in the 50s and 60s when television was looking for content. I'm sure he had a love of those things, but they were also cheap and, easy and ways for him and his company to make money.
Sure.
So I would encourage people to look for those because they're great fun intros and very entertaining in their own right.
Well, we've talked about how some people found this to be a very important film, directors, Michael Powell, Scorsese, etc. And I think an important thing that we should look at is why. Because when you watch the film now, it seems very simple. There's nothing terribly surprising in terms of technique or acting or writing. So what makes this special? And what I think we need to do, going back to what John was saying earlier, is look at the context and say, okay, prior to this, dramatic films, dramatic silent films, pantomime was huge. The way that people acted was a little overwrought, some might think now. It was, extremely dramatic, melodramatic, whereas Chaplin kind of dialed things down a lot from what was typical at the time. And so
it was very, I'll pay, you must pay the rent, and the tying people to the railroad, the damsel to the railroad tracks. And I think that's what people imagine when they imagine a silent film.
Right. And I think they probably imagine people acting with their hands and their mouths are open and their eyes are wide. And this was much more dialed down from that. And that was something different. This is him trying to, as he said, portray people as they are and not, in this kind of heightened reality as John read in that letter. That, I think, was a big part of it. Going along with what Michael Powell said in the quote that I read earlier, they were portraying the complexity of human beings in a way that was unique to silent film, changing the way that human beings and their stories were portrayed. Did you want to speak to what?
Well, I was just going to say that Chaplin, he was slavishly wanting, especially on this film, but on a lot of his films, a restrained approach. He was very anti-melodrama in this, and he just didn't want to go there. And so we may read into it a little melodrama from time to time, in fairness, but I feel like he was trying to break the norms of the day and play with people's perceptions. That's what the critics picked up on. And it's funny, I was reading one quote about Lydia Knott plays the mother in the film.
Right.
And some of the younger actors really understood what Charlie was trying to do. But Lydia Knott had been a long time old dowager stage actress, classically trained, and she came up in a different way of thinking and didn't know her way was the way, right? I'm an expert. I've been doing this longer than you are, sonny boy. Charlie tried 50 takes of one of the scenes in this movie, and she still wasn't getting it. And she finally got so angry, she said, all right, if that's the way you want it, I'll do it that way, but it's not the way I am.
But
so
it's,
he basically had to break her to get her to do it.
To your point, it's literally the actors learning a different way to communicate than the way they've been taught and the way they have done prior to this.
Right.
And that's something significant. It might be akin to, what like Kazan and Brando were doing, whereas before acting was more theatrical, they're trying to bring it down, make it internal, make the internal become external as opposed to, anything more grandiose. And Chaplin was trying to do that in an earlier, he wasn't going quite that small, but he was trying to get there.
I'm not a huge fan of two of films that are considered among his best, which are The Great Dictator and Modern Times. And it's because I think some of the nuance is lost. He heightens the comedy, he heightens. Every scene is a little bigger and broader. And so those are not amongst my favorite of Chaplin's films. And yet, again, Modern Times, some of the scenes are.
I think Modern Times, that movie just blows me away.
And I'm just not on that train, but I get it. Like some of the scenes, like the eating machine and going through the gears and even the humor of picking up the communist flag that fell off the back of the truck carrying stuff, and then he's leading a parade. I love the humor of that, but I feel like it's just too heavy-handed. And I think what Chaplin did best for me is the subtlety and the nuance and the little tiny things he did, like, handing the blind girl the flower and just that little.
That's wonderful. For me, there's room for all of it, because in modern times, the reason it works for me is the humor. We're actually going to talk about another film in our next episode, which could have used some of Chaplin's subtlety and also skill with humor.
I'm intrigued. I'll have to listen.
The way that he talks about modern times through all of this humor, it's just, it absolutely affects me. And he's also able to keep a human story in there with him and his love interest. And it's phenomenal to me. I saw City Lights and Modern Times together at the Music Box in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
With my mother. And I was floored at how affected I was 100 years later by this movie. I was just, how did he do that? How is he talking to me right now?
Were you young, or was this more recent?
No. It was much younger. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that, by the way, on side note, that's like, these things translate 100 plus years
they do.
Later.
That's how you know it's a classic.
One of the things I used to love to do, the silent movie theater theoretically is still there. It's not the same anymore. I don't think they show silent movies almost ever anymore on Fairfax. But I used to go almost every year. They would show The Kid on Father's Day, which is his first feature.
Yeah.
And you would see dads taking their little kids to it, and you could see them kind of restless before the film starts, and they don't know what it is, and the theater is not very luxurious or interesting looking, and it's got a bunch of pictures of old silent movie stars on the wall.
Black and white.
Black and white, exactly. And seriously, within 1 minute, like, we are 100 years later, and these are kids who play video games and are on their phones all the time, and as I am, by the way, no big deal, but they're used to a different language of film. And Chaplin still can, some of them in hysterics. Like,
he still gets to them.
Watching a 7-year-old just losing it with Chaplin.
If I ever have kids,
beautiful.
Yeah, that's going to be the beginning of their film education, is Chaplin, Keaton, like all those guys, just, because you can show it to any age and they'll get something.
If you can't watch Cops from Buster Keaton, or 1 Week, or or for Chaplin, 1 a.m. or Easy Street, or that was my big entrance into silence. That ignited my passion, and I wanted to know everything about Chaplin after that point.
That's
so
great.
Ever since 7th grade is really when that got ignited.
You were talking about The Kid earlier, and 2 posters that I had on my wall in high school were from The Kid. One of them was of he and the kid, of Jackie Coogan.
Jackie Coogan, yeah.
Sitting on the steps with their heads in their hands.
Yep.
And then another one was literally an illustrated poster of the Kid from the time that they were doing publicity.
If you live in Los Angeles, you can still visit a couple locations outside Chaplin Studios where the Kid and so many other Chaplin and other silent films from Keaton and Lloyd were shot. One is on Cahuenga, which is now called Chaplin, Keaton, Lloyd Alley. I think that's the order of the names. I was at the dedication for that, and Kira Chaplin flew in for that, and there were members of the Keaton family there as well, and Sue Lloyd, I think, who's Harold Lloyd's granddaughter, was there, and she's kind of the keeper of the Lloyd flame. And then also down on Olvera Street, where at the very last shot of the Kid, near the end, where he's being taken away in the paddy wagon, and Chaplin chases after to bring it back. Those steps are right there in the Olvera Street.
That's down by Olvera? I didn't know that.
And there are photos on the stairwell there. I'm sure on the internet people can find exactly where it is if they want to go visit.
Well, speaking of locations, Chaplin Studios, where they shot this movie, is at 1416 North La Brea Avenue, Hollywood.
Yeah.
And then the apartment exterior where Edna Purviance's character lives are the Ansonia apartments in Westlake Village. That's at Lake Street.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Lake Street and West 6th Street. So you can still check out that building if you want to.
Yeah, it actually still looks the same.
Pretty cool.
And by the way, they have a very famous recording studio on the Chaplin studio lot. That's where the We Are the World music video and recording session happened, where they check their egos at the door.
Sure.
And so much has been made there in the after Chaplin left.
This was a film made by United Artists. And for those who don't know, Charlie Chaplin was part of a group of actors that came together. These were like the super actors of the time, the biggest stars, and one director. So it's Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith. And they came together and made United Artists, which still exists today in some form. This was Chaplin's first film that he made with United Artists.
4 years after signing the deal, I think they were getting antsy. When are you going to do a film for us?
When are you going to make a funny for us, Charlie? And then he puts this out.
Yeah. Good point.
Pretty interesting. The budget for the time, get this, was $351,853, which in today's, I did inflation calculator using usinflationcalculator.com. It's about $6,653,184.
That's because he took 9 to 10 months to shoot it alone, which is unheard of.
So he shot from November 27th, 1922. According to this, the production went until September 29th, 1923.
I think they might have ended production in full in June and then had some pickups.
Yeah.
Because he was an editorial, because it opened in October.
Yeah, I'm guessing this includes editorial.
Yes.
Exactly. So that was Charles Chaplin Productions.
And it did do better in Europe. It wasn't a huge success, but I mean, it did better there. I think the sense of, I don't know what it was the sensibilities, or that audience was more willing to experience something that was different. I don't know what it was exactly, but yeah, in the US it did not do well, but the critics almost universally championed it as a triumph of movie making.
United Artists premiered it September 26, 1923 at the Criterion Theater in Hollywood. So that's that pamphlet that you were just showing us, that the Criterion advertisement. It said Criterion Theater.
And for our audience that can't see,
John
has come prepared with a wealth of
plethora of Charles Chaplin.
If it was only a visual podcast.
Paraphernalia. And also on October 1st, 1923 at the Lyric Theater in New York. It was first released at an hour and 22 minutes. Now, here's the weird part. The 1976-78 re-release is timed at an hour and 18 minutes. I'm not sure if that's a mistake and it's actually the same length, because what I watched was an hour and 22 minutes. And that's on Max is what I saw it on, although it's also streaming on Criterion. And it's also on Blu-ray if anybody wants to find it.
I have the DVD collection, so I actually watched the quote-unquote deleted scenes. They were not worth
great.
Mentioning. No, they're very quick, and they're just like trims, basically. That's not what I would call a deleted scene.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if the running time actually changed in the 70s for some reason briefly when Chaplin reworked the film a little bit. I mean, I think he was mostly just doing the music, but I don't know if he cut a few minutes out and then they put them back in. But
I do have one minor quip with Max, HBO Max.
Sure, yeah.
And again, this could be applied to almost anything we watch on television or any series we watch,
Sure.
a movie. The card that pops up at the end of the film, the forced thing that happens on HBO Max or Netflix or whatever.
Oh, when they take the credits down and
they take the credits down. In my case, I don't know if this happened with you, it happened before the last shot of the film. So because it ends so abruptly with the end card, right?
Where she's rolling away in the wagon with the kids?
Correct. So like it was almost over.
No, it was obnoxious as hell.
It was obnoxious as hell. It pushed
yeah.
back over it, and the end happened in the little pushback bubble saying, starting in the next 7 seconds is like, I'm sorry, there's got to be a way around that. You're ruining the end, the last shot of this movie I just invested
You'd
in.
think they could figure this out.
There
point.
are ways around it on certain streaming platforms, but
Not Max.
No, not Max. And are you telling me that David Zaslav isn't an actual going to the mats for classic films?
Mr. Zaslav, could you please fix that, because we want to watch the film until the end and not have it made miniature.
I'll hold my tongue.
Yeah, fine.
So here's a quote from Mary Pickford about Woman of Paris. Quote, "Woman of Paris allows us to think for ourselves and does not constantly underestimate our intelligence. It is a gripping human story throughout, and the director allows the situations to play themselves. The actors simply react emotions of the audience. Charlie Chaplin is the greatest director of the screen. He's a pioneer. How he knows women. Oh, how he knows women. I do not cry easily."
Wow.
When seeing a picture. But after seeing Charlie's A Woman of Paris, I was all choked up. I wanted to go out in the garden and have it out by myself. Mary Pickford.
Wow. There's so much you can read into that. Certainly they were close.
Yeah.
They were business partners. They were business partners in the movie company that distributed the film.
She's giving the movie a bump, okay, but she's calling him the greatest director. Like, I mean, she's worked with a number of big ones. Pretty high praise.
Well, yeah. I mean, he influenced countless filmmakers of the time and shortly after, and befriended so many. He was certainly an influence on everybody we've mentioned, and Lubitsch and Tati.
This movie had an
Fellini.
influence on a Lubitsch movie that came soon after.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lubitsch credited it. This
Did
film.
he?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
And then also, I mean, nobody ever says this in anything I've read, and you guys tell me what you think, but I'm a big fan of Sunrise.
Oh yeah, Murnau.
And so even though the story is a bit more complex in Sunrise, there's a bit more intrigue. It's more of a thriller, and which is more my jam.
It's more epic.
It's more epic. It's more cinematic. Frankly,
Absolutely.
You can see like where Murnau might have seen this in the theater and thought, this is an interesting way to go.
Yeah.
What if we push it a little harder?
I think he did really have an influence on European filmmakers, and was influenced by early German filmmakers as well. But Lubitsch, Antonioni, Fellini, Billy Wilder, Jean Renoir. I already talked about Scorsese. Orson Welles called Woman of Paris one of the most important films ever made, admiring its subtle performances and storytelling. So this film was, again, audiences didn't respond. And maybe it wasn't the storytelling. Maybe it was really expectation. And from Charlie Chaplin, you want something different. Right.
Maybe this is a good point in our discussion where we can actually bring it back to the film and talk about whether it works or not. So I guess the last title card is this quote that seems to be the thesis of the film, which says, "Time heals and experience teaches that the secret of happiness is in service to others." Do you feel like this movie is actually working in service of that notion, or do you think that's trying to say something else? I mean, you guys referenced Chaplin's subtlety, but I wonder if it is working in service of that quote, or if that's literally just a throw-off to establish that Marie is in a better place.
Yeah.
That she grew as a character.
I think, yeah, I mean, clearly that's what the film is communicating at the end. As far as that quote specifically, I think, yes, it's a bit heavy-handed to put that quote at the end. I'm not saying that you said that. I'm saying that. Like, when I saw that, I was like, "Ooh, Charlie, come on." But at the same time, do I feel like the film is actually servicing that quote, that idea, that theme? Yes, I do. Is it the only thing that it is servicing? No. Is it kind of indirect? Maybe it's a little indirect.
Sure.
But I think if you look at the characters and you look at how, one of the things that bothered me the most about Purviance's character was when she leaves him hanging on the phone and takes the train. And I'm thinking, wait, he just asked you to wait for a moment. Like, you're going to totally leave this guy?
By the way, can I just interject that as I'm reading all these reviews from the era that are mostly glowing, several of them actually did mention that moment.
That is a flaw.
A couple of them said, and apparently she couldn't wait. Like, even the ones that loved the film called that moment out in 1922 and 1923.
Chaplin
Isn't
is
that amazing?
Chaplin is brilliant at story, but that story point is a big hole in the story.
Yeah,
for me.
I actually find a lot of the interactions early in the film to be a bit clunky, particularly, and I was flippantly kind of referencing it in my synopsis, but I do feel like there is
no.
Yeah,
bring it.
But I do. The thing is, there's all this animus being directed at her, and it's not that backstory is necessary, but it is so prevalent in the film that I felt like even some kind of a throwaway intertitle would have maybe helped clear up some of that. But can you help me come to terms with why every single character? Is it just merely the impropriety of them wanting to elope? I mean, where is all of this coming from?
What's the conflict with the parents?
Yes, yeah. So I mean,
don't know that we know.
Yeah.
Do we?
The father doesn't approve of her running out with Jean in the middle of the night. He locks her in the room. I mean, these are some old school waspy parents, I'm guessing.
Sure.
And so he locks his daughter in the room. She breaks out of the window and goes out with him. Now, I think that is where we see kind of what's happening in this relationship maybe regularly with her and him. So the father doesn't really know him. I don't think he has anything personal against the man. I think he disapproves of how the man is meeting with his daughter late at night.
I was reading that there's more subtext and more backstory that we don't know, and we maybe to Chaplin and again, I'm reading into this as my own take, wasn't important to know.
Sure.
It's not the broad strokes. I think for him, what was more interesting was breaking those stereotypes. Like Marie is a kept woman, a courtesan, yet she's sympathetic. The villain, Pierre, is charming and not entirely bad, right? The hero, Jean, is weak and unable to stand up for his love. And the parents, who are at that time usually played as, doting and loving and supportive, they're the opposite. They're selfish and they're prejudiced.
Yeah.
And I think maybe Chaplin was more interested in those broad strokes than you needing to know what their relationship was and why.
Right.
Maybe I'm reading my own thoughts.
No, yeah, I agree. I don't think that there's any specific good, solid reason given for why the parents don't want her to be with him at the beginning. In the middle, I understand that the mother sees that she's an opportunist. I mean, she's a bit of a gold digger.
And a wild child of some sort, maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
She's a kept woman, and she's going out with this guy who goes out with various women at the same time and is supposed to be marrying somebody else, and she's with... Obviously, that doesn't look good to any mother. But as far as the early part of the film, I think it is kind of a broad stroke of, for some reason, the father doesn't approve. And it may just be that he thinks his daughter isn't ready for marriage. He doesn't want her thinking about boys.
Maybe.
Which is hilarious because she looks like she's 30, 35 or something. Yeah. I don't know how old she actually is.
Stars.
But I mean, if she had been 16 or something, then I would have thought, okay, I think, she's too young.
Well, and it's his father as well who has this extreme reaction to her even being in the house is just like, he just wants to kick her out to the curb. It's raining outside, so let her sit in front of the goddamn fireplace for 5 minutes at least,
Right.
That kind of stuff was a bit jarring to me. But that being said, I don't think the movie needs to take you by the hand and lead you down this clunky exposition of like what happened in their past.
Right. He's not interested in that for some reason. He just wants us to know that they're not approving and they're star-crossed lovers of some sort, right?
Right.
But this is why this podcast and discussions of film are so great, because you are bringing up the end and the end card. And to me, it just raises more questions about the era when it was made, and Chaplin specifically, as we're talking alluding to a little bit of how complicated a sort he was. Clearly it's a morality tale, and is he trying to work out his own?
A lot of his tales are morality tales.
Absolutely.
I think he traded in morality tales largely. Even when he was being humorous, there was a lot of moralizing going on, and not in an obnoxious way to me. I actually like Chaplin's, even if it's a little sappy or whatever. I buy in. I guess I have a similar taste to his in terms of, I'm fine if you want to tell me a certain thing. Just don't tell me directly. Don't be too. That's why the quote at the end bothers me, because it's like,
I hear you.
You already told us, buddy. You don't need to put it on the screen. But maybe he thought that, again, this is 1923. I mean, film's only been around since 1895 at that point. So, I mean,
correct.
And
like I said, nobody, in the beginning, it was somebody shooting a gun at a camera or a train, the Lumiere brothers, just a train going by. Like, he was really perfecting storytelling in a mostly non-melodramatic way that had not really been done
True.
before.
And in terms of innovation, one of the things I want to talk about with Chaplin and why he's important, not just as a performer, but as a director, is because he wasn't a cinematic director in the way that we normally think of. In other words, he wasn't doing fancy camera moves or fancy editing or fancy angles, etc. And a great quote that I remember reading years ago, and I reread it several times, is something like, he said, "I don't need interesting angles. I am interesting." Therein is his directorial prowess. The way he acts to camera, his technical acting in terms of the lens, the way that he reacts, the gestures he does, he was brilliant in terms of his own physicality. And he was able to communicate that also to actors that he worked with.
Although I would also say you're right about the interesting angles aspect of this, but what he did visually was groundbreaking and stunning. And if you look at like the special effects he had to employ in the movie, the short, the two-reeler, The Rink, you can find it. Even people are sharing it on Instagram, how he made it look like he was about to fall.
There are innovations.
There are innovations. But then the storytelling innovations, there are two. One in this movie, let's talk about A Woman in Paris. The scene where he needs to imply without text that she may have a man living with her at home to Jean, right?
Yes.
The staid collar falls by
Right.
mistake out of the drawer. That's a visual way to get around without having,
True.
And that happened as a happy accident, apparently, because the set dresser didn't know that the drawers would have to be opened in the film. So he had them pull a bunch of his clothes out of a drawer in his office, put them in there, and they dropped the collar on the floor. And this is the story that's been told. He got the idea that would help illustrate that. Just as in City Lights,
Right.
the very famous moment, how is the blind girl gonna mistake Chaplin for a rich man? How would you do that without dialogue and it was done by the closing door of a limousine that she couldn't see, right? And then Chaplin appears at her to buy a flower seconds later because he's enamored with her. And those are visual devices that are kind of genius in storytelling.
They're simple,
right?
but they're very intelligent. And also, obviously, I mean, we look at them now and we think, oh, well, how many times have we seen something like that or heard something like that, etc. But again, this is very near the beginning of cinema.
Well, and this movie has been described as a movie of contrasts. So I suppose we could also talk about the way this film is edited, because, specifically, there's a great deal of storytelling being done economically just by cutting between Marie's apartment in Paris and Jean's apartment in Paris, or even just the final shot of this film where Marie's in a caravan traveling one direction and a rich man in a coupe is flying in the other direction. I mean, and it's, again, that might be a little bit heavy-handed, but it absolutely works.
It's one of the devices in Chaplin films that I sort of love. He has a proclivity, I think, of either irising out or people walking down a road.
I was about to say, he has a proclivity for ending his stories on roads. People walking or riding down a road.
Not to give it away, but the circus is like the circus wagons leaving town. In Modern Times, the last shot is like that. He does that a lot. I happen to love it. I mean, it just feels like the end of a Chaplin film. It's a signature that, for me, generally works.
Right. It sort of indicates the end and at the same time a continuation of the lives of the characters.
That's right. And I find there's a beauty and a simplicity to it.
Well, talking about the editing, the two people who were uncredited as the editors are Monta Bell and Charlie Chaplin. I think Monta Bell was a collaborator of Chaplin's, right?
Absolutely. Uncredited, but a lot of people give him a lot of credit for being a force and really an aid to Chaplin on this film.
And he, I think, became a producer. So he did editing and producing and, had a play in Chaplin's career. What else were you going to say, Colin?
I actually was going to go back to something that you just mentioned. And you brought up that quote where he says, like, I am what's interesting. Right. I guess a question that I would bring to you guys is, does he do a good job at imparting any kind of that gravitas onto his own actor? I'll answer a part of that myself. I actually think that the one character that succeeds at that the most is the Pierre Ravel character, Menjou. And I think Menjou is excellent in this film. I think that what he's able to do so subtly and what he's able to convey. We mentioned the term insouciant, but I mean, he really does. That's just him in a nutshell. He's just so blasé about everything, but it actually, I think that's harder to do than it seems.
Yeah. So Chaplin made this film again to highlight Purviance's dramatic skills, but it actually wound up not helping her career that much. It did help the career of Menjou.
A lot.
Yes.
He had done smaller character bits before, and this really launched his career, and he became quite well known.
And it's funny because I don't really know his work that much. There are a few things that I know. I saw him in Paths of Glory. That was the first time I ever saw him playing the wicked general who doesn't really care about his troops. And then, the other thing I remember about him is that he was part of the House Un-American Activities Committee. He was a big, he cooperated, let's say, and it was a leading member of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, which opposed communists in Hollywood. Other members were John Wayne, Barbara Stanwyck, and her husband, Robert Taylor. He also had a controversial mustache, which is interesting. You can read about it.
I didn't know that. I know about his mustache, but why was it controversial? controversial. I missed that.
Some people used it to portray characters that were dubious or had underhanded intentions. Salvador Dali loved his mustache, and I think would hand out Adolphe Menjou mustaches at parties.
No, I did not know that.
With the instead of saying cigarette, he would say moustache, and he would hand them out.
Menjou and Chaplin were certainly on opposite sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Especially later, because McCarthyism really, the Woman of Paris was long before McCarthyism. So really there were no clashes at that time.
No.
But Chaplin mocked HUAC later.
And he was accused of being a communist and left the United States and lived in Switzerland the rest of his life.
That's right. And there's actually a great book. It's called Chaplin versus America. So if you really want to get into it, it's great. It's called Chaplin versus America: When Art, Sex, and Politics Collided, by Scott Eyman. I went to a reading and a signing, so I got to meet him. But it gets deep into the FBI investigations and J. Edgar Hoover's attempts to discredit Chaplin, the impact of the great dictator and Monsieur Verdoux on Chaplin's reputation, and the paternity scandal and moral outrage that contributed to his downfall. And it's funny how much beloved he is now, and in the early days in that period, he was on the outs in Hollywood. I've been asking for years about why Chaplin didn't have his handprints in the forecourt of Grauman's Chinese Theater. He and Sid Grauman were very close
He's
friends.
not there?
He's not there.
That's shocking.
And I've been actually asking this question for many, many years. Some people say it's because he's got his own footprints in Chaplin Studios. They're still there out front of Chaplin Studios. You can go and see them. Some people say they were there, and then when he was supposedly a communist, they were removed and broken up. Some people say no, they rotate them from time to time and they still exist somewhere. So I've never really gotten the real story. My guess is he never did it, but if that's the case, why? Because he and Sid were fast friends, certainly in the early days.
And he was a giant.
And, Fairbanks and Pickford were the first, I think, to put their footprints in cement there, and he couldn't have been closer with Doug Fairbanks and Mary Pickford. I mean,
that's bizarre.
He and Doug Fairbanks were close to the end, like when Fairbanks died at a fairly young age.
Well, getting back to Menjou, Menjou, as to your point, John, was a staunch Republican, and he equated the Democratic Party with socialism.
Well, I hate to hear that he's a collaborator, but at the very least, he's a...
It's the mustache.
He brings a lot to this film.
Mustache.
Well, actually, that brings up another interesting...
I love that Kubrick. I just want to say, I love that Kubrick made him the bad general in House of Glory. I don't think he did that mistakenly.
Yeah. No, I believe that. But I mean, so apparently there's some controversy surrounding this film. When it came out, apparently it was subject to being labeled as an amoral film.
Yeah.
It was pre-code. It was the pre the Hays Code. So I'm sure people did.
You think it's just all that ankle, or
but not pre-morality?
I mean, I was trying to imagine when the unwrapping scene happens, what it must have been like then. They didn't have what we have now, or what we've had for 50 years or whatever. That was... Sure, not everybody felt scandalized by seeing it. I'm sure it was pretty tame for some people, but in general, that stuff, those images were just not out there.
Well, also maybe a young woman escaping from her house to go be with a man, and not to say that they did anything wrong, but just, maybe that wasn't what parents wanted to see on the screen.
America is puritanical enough for me to buy that as being enough. Yeah. Although maybe also, I wouldn't say a super vivid depiction, but I'd say for the time, a relatively realistic depiction of suicide. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Suicide, yeah. I think the most scandalous thing was probably the Menjou relationship, where she's a kept woman and he's going to marry another woman, and there are these other women that are kind of gossiping and vying for affection.
And they're flippant, and Menjou's flippant about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
He doesn't feel like, we can still go on. It's fine. Who cares?
Right.
It didn't even cross his mind that it was problematic. He laughed it off as a cad.
Well,
but
and
he's
she laughs it off
the whole time.
She laughs it off in front of her friends anyway. Remember when they read about him getting married in the paper and she says, "C'est la vie," or whatever she says?
Yeah. And I think you're right, John. Flippant, but not cartoonishly evil.
No.
He's charmed. I mean, again, he's supposedly the bad guy, but you can't not find him appealing in a way, even though don't do it.
He's
it's
an
a bad
entitled
decision.
American aristocrat.
That's right.
That's He's that through and through. He portrays it beautifully.
Parisian aristocrat.
Oh, excuse me, Parisian aristocrat. I think he was
Menjou.
born. But I think Menjou was born in like Philadelphia or somewhere. Maybe not there, but somewhere. He's American.
Yeah. Even though in that depiction of her kind of tossing that off, "C'est la vie," then we end that scene with her kind of weeping as the camera iris is out. So
right.
Well, that's part of what made this unique, like the subtext of those moments, which is, I'm not saying it had never been done in film before. It just wasn't typical, right? Mm-hmm. Usually what we're talking about, those melodramatic moments, is the heroine. There is no subtext to the scene. You're seeing, oh no, I'm in peril, right?
That's the right
There's
word.
a train coming, or this is love. You never saw subtext, and that's what Chaplin was in search of always, even like at his best in any one of his films. And not to bag on Max Sennett, but because I love some of that stuff, but I love it for what it is, which is a cartoon. It's a living cartoon, right? It's early moving pictures. Cops were like nameless, faceless. They had no story. They were just cops chasing the bad guy, or you were the villain, or you were the hero. And Chaplin's like showing, no, people are complicated. There's more to this story. And yeah, she may be a kept woman, but this is not her real dream, and she's not satisfied. This is an adult exploration that we had not had much in that era.
Yeah, he's, like you said, he's dealing in subtext. He's dealing with the different facets of a true human being, an actual three-dimensional, living, breathing person. For instance, to what you just said about her wanting to be a married woman with children, with a man who respects her, and then he points out the window to that couple outside,
the kids.
And the woman's dragging like 2 or 3 kids, and they're dropping stuff, and the guy's lugging something, and they look like an unhappy, not very well-to-do family, and he starts laughing, and then she basically gets angry at him. And
that was convenient.
That was convenient. But I mean, I think Chaplin's also saying, hey, there's 2 sides to everything. Marriage can be a good thing. It can also be a really, really tough thing. Well,
he proved it until his final marriage to Una.
Married like 4 times, and he had 11 kids. And
yeah, but I think he got it right in the end. He was married to Una for decades, his last wife.
But he also married her a little young, didn't he?
Yep. Eugene O'Neill's daughter, actually. And Eugene and I think Charlie never really were close. He never fully accepted Charlie, as far from what I understand. Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to talk about some little fun details about the film. Arthur Stiebolt was the production designer on the film. I think he did a great job, but he also played a cook. And another cook in the film was played by A. Edward Sutherland, and he was the assistant director. He's also one of the original Keystone Cops. Did you know that, John?
I don't think I did, or if I did, I forgot.
That's kind of fun.
Interesting.
So I thought that kind of tied him back to Max Sennett and how it was all such a small world back then.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that is really one of the only sequences that kind of has any levity in it. I mean, there's this long protracted sequence in a kitchen.
It feels very much like earlier Chaplin. Yeah.
I mean, this was, I guess, Chaplin's real only drama. Maybe Limelight is another film that was more dramatic, and most of his other films had dramatic and humorous stuff.
Verdu is serious sometimes, but it's also humorous.
Dark humor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, I want to get back to also what Colin was saying about the actors. Do we feel like the actors did a good job? I mean, I think we've talked about Chaplin directing, but how did the actors do? And we like Menjou.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I keep coming back to him. I do think that there is kind of an absence of some of that gravitas. And I don't, I do think that Purviance should have, just based on her past work alone, had more opportunities to succeed. But I don't know if this is the perfect showpiece for her abilities. And maybe that's, just because of the character and how the character is written. Mm-hmm. So yet, because it is such a movie of contrast, I mean, one moment she wants to be a kept woman, the next moment she wants to be desperately in love. You would think that would afford more of an opportunity for some range, but I don't really see a whole lot of it in there. But then again, I do have to try to view this through a different lens, through a silent movie lens.
No, but I agree with you. I don't think that anybody in this film, aside from Menjou, really sticks out in terms of acting ability or charisma on screen.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of Edna Purviance, and I have a soft spot in my heart for her, this film, having really finally just seen it, isn't going to be the one that I remember her for. And I've talked several times about all the glowing reviews of this film from the period. There were a couple I read that were critical of her, and I feel sad about that, because I have a feeling, having really complicated personal relationship with the director you're working with who's got you on payroll. I can't even imagine what that must have been like, and what was Chaplin like to work with, and especially if he's your ex-lover that you still work with. I can only imagine. And did that have any impact negatively on performance?
On her performance, yeah, because she doesn't really pop for some reason for me.
She's not bad.
She's not bad. No. Nobody's bad in this film. I actually like Jean Millet, Carl Miller, the guy who plays Jean Millet. I think he's pretty good. I wish that there had been a bit more nuance to their performances, a bit more. I wanted to see them pop more off the screen. And maybe it's intimidating to be directed by the biggest movie star in the world. I don't know, and you're thinking, I need to, compete with this guy.
I agree with you, but I actually feel like the places where I see the performances pop, so to speak, are from some bit characters. It's like you mentioned that scene in the kitchen, but also her friends, her retinue of friends, like what is it, Paulette and forget
Fifi.
the other, and Fifi. Those two are kind of fun and bubbly, and they bring an energy to those scenes that is kind of lacking.
One of my favorite
energy that you get from a Clara Bow or a Colleen Moore film or something.
One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when they're gossiping, and he doesn't focus on them. He focuses on the masseuse, who's working the body of one of them, and you just see her face reacting and her eyes rolling and things like that. I wanted to mention her. Shout out to Nellie Bly Baker as the masseuse. She was uncredited.
So if people watch this film, I think that's another good scene to see an example of what Chaplin is trying. Imagine another filmmaker in a more melodramatic style doing that. He would have the masseuse probably going overboard, start being harder on the body as she's hearing things that are disagreeable, or
even worse, he would have only focused on the two women talking. It would have been close up, close up, close up, close up. You see the masseuse maybe once. What's great about the scene is you see the whole conversation through her face.
That's right. And
that's brilliant directing.
And that goes back to what I'm saying about visual style. For all the talk about he didn't have interesting angles or maybe high contrast,
but the people were interesting and the story was
right.
interesting.
He's not just saying I'm interesting. He's saying I'm going to create scenarios that are visually interesting, even though it may not be through the language that was further developed a little bit later. I'm doing it a little differently, but I do have a visual style, so don't rob me of that.
Yeah, well... You're gonna think I'm an absolute idiot for this.
No,
you weren't recording.
She's let's just start at square one, guys. She has a very Nellie Bly Baker has a very handsome face. She's a handsome woman.
What are you saying?
I thought, and this is not me trying to be mean. I apologies to her. I thought that it was supposed to be Jean in drag, like spying on them.
No.
Yes, I did.
Wow. That would be funny.
Now I realized that it wasn't, but at first, because she's got strong features and
strong features. I agree.
I just thought that maybe the movie was trying to interject some of that Chaplin-esque levity that this movie had been missing.
Right.
And no, it was not.
That wasn't the case. Whoops.
But anyway.
Well, Chaplin did go there. Sid Chaplin, Charlie's brother, did dress up as a woman in one film. And I think Charlie did as well, actually.
Right.
I thought you were going to say off screen. I was like, really? I never heard about this.
But no, that is a really interesting choice. It's an interesting filmmaking choice.
I want to jump back to what you were talking about earlier, Colin, the themes. He stated a theme at the end, which is, the true joy in life is the service to others. Okay. What other themes are present in this story for you guys?
Well, I think it's trying to ask a question about the morals of living a frivolous life. Is that how you would describe it?
That's good, yeah.
Or our life that is solely dedicated to...
material gain.
Right. I don't know exactly what the film is trying to say about those things, other than maybe they won't steer you toward happiness in any particular meaningful way.
And Chaplin certainly, on some level, experienced all that himself, coming from kind of the poorhouse, working class
slums,
the slums, absolutely, and then getting a taste of quickly going to a life of insane riches, and being a global celebrity who could do anything, be with anybody. It's kind of spending weekends at Hearst Castle.
It's kind of amazing that he was as sane as he was. He's literally like Horatio Algiers' story, which is so uncommon in America, but is the American dream. Like he literally, and he isn't American, but he came to upon his success in America, his big success, to go from literally the slums and being a foster child and having a mother who's in and out of mental homes and having not knowing where his father is and having another half brother and just like having a really broken home, and then to start acting in vaudeville and what do they call those, the houses where they would play the piano and they would do acts, and that's what he came from.
Music hall stuff.
Music hall, that's it.
The Carnot troupe.
The music halls. And then he goes into films and he, like you said, almost immediately sees success, and the biggest success. And it's incredible that he just wasn't completely insane.
But in some realm, and some of it's based on the filmmaking, he was a victim of that success even in this film.
I think that what Chaplin does is he goes back to the same theme that perhaps all of his works have, in addition to what Colin was saying, which I absolutely think is right in terms of not being blinded by the things in life that don't matter, like pearls and affairs with people that you don't really care about, but actually, sticking to the people that do matter and doing things for the people you love and in service of them. I think what he's also talking about, at least in my view, is circumstances, the way they react to it and how resilient people are, and how really the way they react to the circumstances determines their happiness or not. And so at the very end, we see Purviance's character with Jean's mother, and I think they're raising foster children because she doesn't seem to have a husband or anything or a lover. Right. So it seems like they're just adopting children who don't have parents and they're raising them together. And that's the way that they're going to get over Jean killing himself, because he was a man torn between these two women, and it drove him insane, literally.
All it takes is for somebody witnessing you having a good cry to go from being murderously angry with you to wanting to start an orphanage with you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it does. Everything turns on a dime when the son dies, and they start raising. Yeah, they literally have their own little orphanage. Well, are there any other things you guys want to talk about with this film, A Woman of Paris, A Drama of Fate?
The only thing I could leave off on it with is I think that I didn't see enough in here to sink the career of Edna Purviance. It's a shame, and it's interesting that Chaplin had to pivot so hard. I mean, Gold Rush is right after this, right?
Yeah, next film. Yeah.
So, I mean, it almost makes you wonder. It is, I guess, kind of a testament to what you were just describing as being trapped by his own success, Bill. So,
yeah, the next three films to me are by far my favorites. Mm-hmm. Gold Rush, then City Lights. Gold Rush, then The Circus, then City Lights. Yeah. And for me, those are, for the features, that's the sweet spot for me.
Yeah, but I mean, so I guess I would just say, just as a precursor to those films, this absolutely deserves a watch. I mentioned earlier that I don't feel like the film particularly succeeds on its own terms. What I meant by that is I just don't feel like it quite... I suppose that I felt like there are these takeaways that maybe we're supposed to be left with, or these final morals that we're supposed to leave with. And it didn't quite instill those in me in the way they think that it wants to. Mm-hmm. But that being said, I think it's a really interesting, I say artifact, I don't mean that in a pejorative sense.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think it's an interesting artifact. It's definitely not in the top films of his that I care about or think are important, but we can look at it intellectually now and say, this was important because it changed the way that actors acted, directors directed, the way that drama was conveyed. But is it one of his classics? No, probably not, in terms of just watching it as a contemporary audience for pure pleasure. Sure. But another working title for it was Destiny, which I thought was interesting. And we should also mention the subtitle it has. It's A Woman of Paris. Subtitle is A Drama of Fate. So right there, he's telling the audience, this is something that it's almost cosmic in the way that it is saying that these characters are affected by their circumstances. And it's focusing on that.
Yeah, Destiny was a early working title, but also Public Opinion was another one. So that what do we surmise from just that what he was trying to do? That was a working title, even I think before Destiny.
Some of the moral outcry that happened when the film did come out shows us some public opinion about the way that these people were living their lives.
Certainly there was lots of controversy, even at the time, with Charlie's marriage to the very young Lita Gray, which was scandalous in so many ways and went to trial.
Yeah.
So who
Not
knows
my
what personal demons he was also working out.
Not my favorite aspect of
No, of
Chaplin's
course
personal
not.
life.
No,
but,
nor mine.
No, Chaplin's fascinating.
Endlessly fantasy.
If you read a little bit about him, and you'll be drawn in. So, John, let's talk a little bit about 3 films that you've seen recently, either old or new, that you would like to recommend to an audience.
Well, I'm going to start with something thematically to what we're talking about, which I haven't brought up yet because I knew we were going to get here. There have been a lot of documentaries about Chaplin. Richard Schickel made one that was very good. In 2021, there was The Real Charlie Chaplin, which was very good. By far, my favorite Chaplin documentary, and maybe one of my favorite Hollywood documentaries of all time. We already mentioned Kevin Brownlow. It's by Kevin Brownlow and David Gill, and it was a 3-part docu-series made by Thames Television. It's from 1983, and it's called Unknown Chaplin, and it is spectacular. This is where I would start, frankly, even before watching a Chaplin film. If you haven't seen Chaplin, if you got this far to the podcast, I'm hoping you've watched some Chaplin or have some interest in Chaplin. It's fantastic. These guys, they've done multiple Chaplin documentaries. So what happened is they uncovered Chaplin used to destroy he just saw no value in his outtakes, in his rushes, as they would call them, films that weren't working, things he didn't like. He would just destroy stuff. They found a treasure trove of footage, which in 1983, which is spectacular. Finally, I think all 3 parts are up on YouTube for free, but it's immensely compelling.
Terrific.
So I would say people should start there.
Yeah.
And repeat that title one more time.
Unknown Chaplin.
Okay.
Then I have to mention, having just gotten back recently from Sundance, I saw a lot of good stuff, but I saw a handful of really good documentaries. Mr. Nobody versus Putin, Come See Me in the Good Light, Deaf President Now, Zodiac Killer Project, which is so innovative in the fact that basically the documentarian was trying to tell a specific story, didn't get the rights to the book they were trying to get to make the film, but they didn't let that stop them. And in the process, basically said, this is what I would have done, and this is the formula for a true crime documentary. Absolutely fascinating. Still tells the story, but without the rights to the book. There's a great doc called Predators. Andre is an Idiot. Black News, which is kind of a hybrid documentary. There's a Sally Ride documentary, and Marlee Matlin documentary is great. There's a Jeff Buckley documentary that's great. And then I wanted to end with a documentary that people can see right now. Sly Lives is the new Questlove, Amir Thompson documentary about Sly Stone. And
great.
It's available now on Hulu. And if you like what Questlove has done in the past, Oscar-winning director now, documentarian, Sly Stone's story is so complicated and fantastic and tragic and all those things. But it's absolutely, especially if you're a music fan.
Yeah. No, I think that's the thing that Questlove does better than even his music is he's a really good curator of stuff you should know musically.
He's a musicologist. Now, I know a lot about music, but he could probably put his music knowledge to the test and beat almost everybody.
Yeah, no, his book on the subject is worth reading for sure. You kind of alluded to it, but do you get the sense that most of those documentaries that you listed there are going to get distribution or get it easily?
I don't know. It's not a look. It's a tough time in film. When I started going to Sundance, it was a tough time in indie film, right? How do these films get seen around the country? And now it's a tough time in movies in general.
Whatever do you mean, John?
I mean, it's
Everything's
funny.
fine, John. Everything's fine.
Another film I just watched again, which I'd seen when it came out, because it's not the kind of film that's getting made anymore. I rewatched after James Earl Jones died in September, I think. I rewatched Matewan by John Sayles.
I adore Matewan.
They
were going to show it at the Cinematheque, and John Sayles was going to be there, and I had a ticket, and it sold out, and then the fires hit, and they canceled it, and then they were going to postpone it, and then they said no, it's just canceled.
It's a brilliant film, and it's not the kind of film. I mean, with few exceptions, it's not the kind of film that really gets made anymore,
and it's not the kind of film that got made a lot then either. John Sayles is a freaking anomaly. Like, he's a beast. So, I love that guy.
Yeah, it's exactly what I wanted to say. Sayles can't even get films made anymore, which is a shocker because he's made I encourage the audience to go out and watch a John Sayles film. And he worked with these great stock players almost every time. David Strathairn was in a lot of them. Chris Cooper was in a lot of them. James Earl Jones is fantastic I love him in that. Yeah. I think I started going to Sundance after seeing him do a Q&A in Atlanta for City of Hope.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a movie that doesn't get brought up enough.
No, I mean, I guess my homework assignment is either, if you don't want to watch a silent film in Chaplin, watch a John Sayles film because he's underappreciated. Fortunately, he's worked on theater and writing books because he can't get films financed in this marketplace.
He's turning the films that he can't get financed into novels now.
8 Men Out, The Secret of Rowan Inish, which is beautiful, Lone Star, Men with Guns, obviously The Return of the Secaucus 7, which was...
I love that movie so much.
Baby, It's You, Brother from Another Planet. He's got such... And he's not really a household name. He should be for film lovers.
He's a hero.
A lot of film lovers like him.
He's an absolute hero.
But the fact that he's not making movies, mostly not because he doesn't want to, but because of finance, I just long for these kinds of films, which are sort of occasionally being made now, but not like they were.
He's a true maverick, and I hope that actually out of what's happening with the industry right now, that more comes of this time with independent filmmaking, because this is exactly the kind of thing where you have a situation where the studios don't know what people want to see, and that's changing. Literally, the ground is moving beneath our feet, and that's sometimes when the most exciting work gets made.
And there's so many talented voices out there.
Absolutely.
You asked if those documentaries from Sundance are going to get sold. I sure hope so. Only one sold. The Perfect Neighbor got a $5 million deal for a documentary. That's amazing. But there were a lot of great docs there, and at least as the recording of this podcast, that's the only one I think that found distribution from the festival on. So I hope that changes.
I know where people can find out more about you, sir.
If they want to connect with me, I guess the easiest thing to do is on Instagram. I'm don't ask questions. It's Bernstorm 5000. BERNSTORM 5000.
That's not so bad.
I got a friend who calls me Bernstorm.
I like Bernstorm.
Yeah, so they
actually, that's a good name.
Labeled me with that. So
I like it. This episode is sound engineered, edited, and mixed by Colin Dixon. It was produced by William Budell and Colin Dixon. Original music composed by Michael Riola. Recorded at Booze Hollywood Dell in beautiful Hollywood, California. If you'd like to contact us with comments, suggestions, or high praise, email us at cosmicmotionshow@gmail.com or send us a voice message at speakpipe.com/Cosmic Motion. You can find us on the socials at Cosmic Motion or Cosmic Motion Show. Emails, messages, audio, or other media you send us may be featured on the program. We want to thank our guest, John Bernstein.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Thanks to my amazing co-host, Colin.
Please hang up the phone just 30 seconds later, folk. Just 30 seconds.
Thank you, listener, for joining us on this episode. We look forward to sharing more thoughts with you on the next one. Until then, keep learning, growing, and creating.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.